Without further ado, those of you who are eagle-eyed will have noticed two things. First of all, I'm Swifty, and secondly, Alberto isn't here. So he sends his apologies. He's unfortunately unable to make the event. Last time, it's because he almost died. He had a hemorrhage in his carotid artery. This time, thankfully, it's life-threatening, but unfortunately, he can't make it. So you're stuck with me. I'm sorry. So that said, let's move straight on into it. We're going to be covering a bunch of things. I'm going to quickly talk through what are payment applications. Why am I doing this? This is because I'm not talking about retail banking payment applications where you log onto your Lloyds bank account and you make a payment for whatever it is you've bought. I'm talking about back-end systems here, things that large companies use to channel huge amounts of money to make settlements. You'll understand more about that in a moment. We'll then talk about what are the lines of attack against these systems. We'll talk about what are the standard flaws that we've come across over the years of dealing with these systems. Alberto is a pen tester for many years. I've worked in banking for the financial industry for about 15 years. And then, okay, it's all very well talking about what the problems are. We're then going to talk about how to fix it. Fixing it is, as it turns out, not a trivial exercise. It's going to take some time, which drops me into why am I doing this talk? Why am I doing it? It's because the security industry generally, and even my colleagues in other financial institutions in the security area, don't really understand back-end systems. It's this sort of murky business, quasi-accounting, whatever type area that's populated by people who understand about left-hand, right-hand systems and talk about FIDES bureaus and things like that. And frankly, it strikes everybody as a bit odd, kind of boring, and we've left it alone. This is a major problem because there are unbelievably vast amounts of money going through these systems. If you're a major investment bank making lots of settlements against trades, especially if you're doing any kind of algorithmic trading, you potentially are in the trillions, clearing trillions of dollars through this a year. Even a company that doesn't do that kind of trading, but simply is just a straightforward trading company, a big one, you could be pushing $1 billion a day through this payment gateway, which means you've got money flowing back to you of over $1 billion, because obviously you've got a margin for profit in the money that comes back. So there's lots of scope for fingers in the pie and for hiding things. Volume means complexity. I think the security industry needs to actually start to seriously do something about this, because otherwise we'll be in the same place that retail banking was, whatever it was, 8-10 years ago, where they started to work out that there were these people who could man in the middle the browser and blah, 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 and steal a certain amount of money from their customers. And it started turning from being a bit of an annoyance into, $10 or $20 million a year were walking out the door, which they had to make good, okay? This is the same scenario. It's going to take years to put proper solutions in place, same as with the retail front-end banking. And we're not talking $10 or $20 million here. Add a zero, at least, per company. So, landscape. So, this is just sort of basic context that you need to keep in your mind. Okay, so hold these thoughts. You've got the front office. Okay, this is generic. You do trading, I make a trade with you, or you build widgets, and in order to build widgets, you need to buy things, or you need to you sell your widgets to somebody, whatever. There's a business process there. We don't care. It's not very interesting. This is where it starts to become interesting. The business process requires payments to be made, or purchase orders to be made, or you send somebody a purchase order saying, I want you to give me an invoice saying, give me some money, okay? That will, depending on the business, go into some kind of purchase order raising, settlementsy type system, okay? That's a really good target, which we'll talk about later. And if you're in a trading business, so financial trading business, it might go into some trade reconciliation system as well. That's not so interesting, except that you can suppress your activity for quite some time there. So you all remember, bearings and sock gen and all of those kinds of things where, some rogue trader, UBS, ripped off a company for huge amounts of money. Well, they didn't rip off the company. They basically just hid their losses. They did that by fiddling with the reconciliations. So what happens when your payment, your purchase order, your payment is about to happen? Well, it books into the accounting system, into some ledger saying this money against this counterparty has been made, this payment has been made. And it'll also send an instruction of some kind to some kind of payment gateway. Payment gateway covers many things depending on the company. It can be some kind of literal manual or almost like a retail bank account where you log on to, the chief accountant logs onto an online bank account and says, make these payments to these standard counterparties, or it uploads some kind of file, generally some clear text file, obviously horribly insecure. Those plain text files uploaded to a bank, they're called EFTs, electronic fund transfers. I don't know why, makes them sound more secure maybe. If you're more serious, one of the big boys, which is obviously where the money lies, hence the opportunity, this payment gateway is basically punts the money out to a third party broker, effectively, FIDES or Swift. By the way, that Swift is nothing to do with me. It's just a name. And you will send them an instruction, and the instruction says, move money from this bank account to those counterparties over there, and here are all of the payment details. And then they have agreements with all of your banks. They'll send an instruction to all of those banks, and then your banks will make arbitrary payments to wherever it happens to be. Okay, you can probably see where I'm going with here. Okay, you've also got master data. Master data is a great place to play. This is the holy place where you put in this counterparty, he's KYC cleared, here are his bank details, their bank details, here's their credit limit, all of that kind of lovely stuff, which is just ripe for playing with. And then obviously at the end of that, the money ends up in a bank, which you don't want to play with because, anyway. So, the opportunity, again, this is sort of a bit more background context. This is general problems of the process. So how technical fiddling can be covered up or missed. So there are massive payment and reconciliation volumes here. Reconciliation is a bank statement comes in and you put that bank statement into your accounting system and you do a match. I said I'd pay $1 million to him. I get the statement back and it said we made a payment of $1.1 million. Okay. We're $100,000 over, it's a break. Right, somebody needs to look at that, figure out what the hell happened and sort it out and get the money back or whatever, okay? Because you have vast volumes here, it can be difficult to see. There's suppression that you can do, and also volumes, they're acceptable error margins, okay? This is where people can sneak in under the radar. So you hear about somebody who's worked for a business for 15 years and over the course of time to feed their gambling habit, they've stolen $1 million and fed it away on the horses or something. They're doing various things. Commonly, one of them is an acceptable margin for error. So in a small company, that might be any break less than $100, £100. You don't care. It's not worth the effort of investigating. Anybody care to guess what an acceptable error break that you don't bother investigating is in a major trading house? Somewhere between $100,000 to $400,000. Less than that is not worth investigating. Okay? Human error. Provide an explanation that seems logical. The currency changed slightly because I altered it, okay? People will look at that explanation because it's one they know. They'll take it, you're done. And among reconciliations, so I talked about money coming in, money going out, and you do a match. Normally, you might do weekly reconciliations. Some companies may even do daily, but the end of the month reconciliation is the big one, okay? They never reconcile. Ask any accountant, talk to anybody who works in finance, they don't reconcile. So you have all sorts of other things going on. You have accruals, and you have depreciation, you have all sorts of other shit that we'll talk about later. But basically, they are expecting breaks. Also, basically nobody understands the accounts anyway. You'll find this, there is almost nobody in a company, except for one or two people who actually understand the accounts because they're impenetrable, and they're impenetrable for a reason, because there's all sorts of fancy accounting techniques that are used to, how can I put it? They're there for tax efficiency, okay? So, nobody does a manual check. Nobody actually goes to each bank account and says, how much money went in, how much money went out, let me reconcile that against my accounting system, let me reconcile that against my payment gateway, all three match, everything is accounted for. You look at your golden source of truth, which is your accounting system, and all of the feeds come into that, and as long as that all works and the bottom line balance seems to be there, you're good. The only people who actually look at all three are forensic accountants, and those are the people who turn up when a company's gone bust to work out where the money is, okay? Auditors. Sorry, I hate auditors. It's a peeve of mine. It's unnatural. I'm sorry, but there you go. Auditors don't audit. Any of you who've ever worked in a company that's been audited will know that accountants and auditors will come in, they'll look at processes, they'll look at procedures, they'll look at evidenced accounts, they'll ask you some questions, you'll give them some bullshit about how you secure the process with, whatever, FIPS, grade A, yes, DH, PCI, blah, whatever. They'll put a tick in a box and they'll come back and pest you next year. So, landscape issues. Trade recs, settlements. So sometimes you will see that the settlements engine talks to the payment gateway directly, and sometimes it does it straightforward by broadcasting messages, generally unsigned, just a packet dropped onto the wire, off it goes, payment details in there, thank you very much, and off it goes. This is called direct settlements. Banks love direct settlements. It's really efficient, okay? So what could go wrong there? You've also got the actual payment, this area here. So you've got SAP or you've got whatever it is that you create your payment instruction in, okay? People log into that through the GUI, okay? There's no left-hand, right-hand, so there's left-hand, right-hand operators, very often not two-factor authenticated, steal their credentials, log in as them, you create your payment, you approve your payment, the payment goes for payment, you're done. Master data not secured, fine, create a new counterparty, fiddle with the counterparty details, change the bank account details, the world's your oyster. At the server, so all of this front-end stuff is too complex because we're low-level guys and GUIs do our head in, fine, go to the server. The payment and the payment file itself and the reconciliation file that comes back from the bureau is generally written out to a secure file share in plain text before being loaded up into the accounting system or being created and sent off to the payment gateway. Okay? Secure file share, anybody? Administrators, you, anybody else. You've got straight access to that. Private keys generally lying around, assuming that they're even use a private key and it's not one of these plain text DFTs or something like that. Therefore, you can steal that and you can just create any payment file you like and sign it, and it's legitimate, and the bureau will pay it. Or you could just go straight to the database because the payment's probably in the database as this payment has been authorized to this counterparty for this much money. Fine. Change a few rows in the database, a few columns, play around. Okay, I'm making a payment to you. Well, maybe not. obviously none of this stuff is secured in memory. Nothing, none of it. I have not seen a single payment gateway, accounting system, financial system, nothing I've ever seen as actually secured against memory attacks. But on the other hand, why bother? There's just no need. If you're going there, you're looking in the wrong place. And then you've got the payment gateway itself. Okay, signing in crypto generally happen there, which means that obviously you can be arbitrarily messing with anything up until it gets there. Once it's there, because the signing and the encryption actually happen there, obviously if you've broken into that, you can make your changes to the payment files there too, okay? The private keys almost certainly just lying around there anyway. So you've got the same problem we just talked about. So I've been talking about payment files. What the hell's a payment file? So you've got an MT101. This is the international standard way of saying payment file, which, that's not me, is it? No, good. Which means, which is something that Swift or FIDES, these big bureaus use and banks will use to send money about. And then you have the MT940, which is basically the statement file, so the thing that you match against all of your payments. So you make your payments, your accounting system has logged the payments you make, you get an MT940, which will be sucked up and to some extent automatically matched in your accounting system, okay? So, for example, that's the unique reference, so you know that this particular payment matches is for this particular line in your bank statement. That's for how much it is, so $1.3 million in this case. And pay to that bank and pay that account and name, okay? So security services of account, whatever it is. By the way, these have been changed, so, you know. Feel free to try and make a payment to it, but, you know, you're not going to have much joy. So pay to that bank, here's the details, that much money, and that's how you match it. Cool. It's very handy that you do have this unique reference so you can match them. So if you do fiddle with this amount of money out, you can also change it in the statement coming back. Warning. First hint of why this becomes difficult. These formats are international standard, which of course means that they vary by bank. So those numbers, so line 32B, line 21, those are pretty standard. Pretty much everybody uses that. But the more makeup of the file, the spacing, the line references, the spacing and various other things do change. This will make for a parsing nightmare when you go off to try and fix this later. Also, these files are huge, okay? They have all sorts of fields in them. These are just some of the more interesting ones for the purposes of what we're talking about. So, okay, starting to get into how people screw it up before we talk about what to do. So, straight from the manual. Payment file processing. Now, this is an example of a manual that is created by somebody who is talking about how they secure their payment process, okay? So the files are automatically stored in a predefined folder. User access to this folder should be limited. Yeah, good start. The sum bank account is an example of a hash total which can be used to check the integrity of the data. Okay, so they've got that idea. Great, but it's a hash. And this is a common problem you will see everywhere. People don't understand hashing versus cryptographic signing. They think they're the same. Obviously, they're not. Transport of the payment file, FTP or SFTP. The file is often directly read from the account subfolder, i.e. you have a piece of shitty code that dives into this shared folder, has hard-coded credentials, grabs something, does something, and off it goes, okay? So you go off to your payment file processing manual, wherever you are or wherever you're auditing or wherever you're pen testing, you read the user guide and it says, hack me here, here, and here. So this is a standard process. This is a real one. But I've seen this in many places, and those of you who are pen testers who've tested this kind of stuff will have seen this before. How do you create the payment file? Well, you echo the password via GPG to make your file. So obviously the password is just lying around, and the file is too. So do whatever you like, upload it. They usefully give you the upload credentials as well. And then you copy the outgoing payment file to somewhere else. So do what you like, create what you like, and then you can also remember to put everything back the way it should have been in the payment file that's over there that gets sucked into the accounting system as the record for the money that went out. And then exactly the same on the statement side, FTP, go to here, here's the password, thank you very much. Decrypt the file using this password, and then put it over there. So you can go straight to that file, edit it up to what it is that they thought they made the payment for, complete suppression. You can keep that ball rolling for a bit. So, lines of attack, basic lines of attack, bit of a recap. Manual payments, of course, you can steal the bank creds, same as you do in retail banking, from the poor old end user, and just transfer cash. Reconciliation avoidance is more difficult. There's a direct banking interface. Do the same, you can mess with the payment file, correct the reconciliation statement as we just talked about. And if it's FIDES or SWIFT, so it's nicely encrypted and what have you, you can just grab it before it gets signed for decryption and verification. Slightly less basic, second-hand fraud. So as we said, you can steal the authentication details from the left-hand, right-hand officers. A bit more difficult if they're using two-factor authentication, but we all know there are ways around that. More difficult, so you could use the ways around that, but why bother? Instead, just change the customer details and change back later. Internal collusion. Well, why are we talking about internal collusion? That's just two accountants getting together and making an agreement. Because this isn't just about evil, wicked hackers stealing money. This is also about end-to-end securing the process against everybody. And as we know, most theft, most fraud is actually internal employees and people who work in the finance area. So whatever solution you put in place, and I talk about one, has to be able to deal with internal collusion. If you turn up and you just say, we can defend you against wicked hackers like this, you're not going to get buy-in because they know that most of the money is not Russian crime gangs, but is Joe, who worked in accounts for the last 20 years. Direct change to the database, fiddle with the master details, change the counterparty details, blah, 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 okay? External partners in fraud, so we'll pay whatever. You on the inside can suppress the wreck. They on the outside can break in and steal the money. You can keep that rolling for a long time. So again, your solution has to be able to deal with collusion, internal versus external as well. This one is funny. So operator accuracy reports. People know their operators. Some operators are better than others. And this is just an example of the sorts of tricks you can play and things that you can do in order to mislead people who are trying to understand what the hell happened. You make all of the incorrect payments against the user ID of the most incompetent operator. They're going to assume that it was him being incompetent or stupid as usual. I won't talk through all of these, but you get the idea, okay? If you want to be serious about suppressing the payment breaks, hiding your tracks for long enough to steal really serious money as opposed to just serious money, you need to get into all sorts of accountancy tricks. These things aren't generally as complex as you think. And they also can be useful in just to free up cash in order to then steal it and then suppress it in the accounts. So you change interest rates on a loan, there's some spare cash that is now hanging around, fine, move it off to, well, I don't know, the Grand Caymans, wherever it is that you have your dodgy bank account. Make up a credit for another part of the company, then siphon that money off somewhere else, and then when their money's gone, obviously you make that out as a loan to a different part of the company. So the money came in, the money went out, it's all good, except that it's actually over there and not over there. So this is the gold standard. This is how a tier 1 investment bank does it. I don't know if you can really see that, but up at the top you've got your Fidesz bureau and you're uploading your MT101. You've got your payment system here and plain text I can't read that either. Okay, let's do it over here. You've got your, will the mouse work? Yep, there we go. So you've got encrypted payment file over here. The encryption's actually happening on a hardware security module, so the keys can't be moved off it. Users authenticate against the Active Directory. You've got your users on your systems over here that log in. They use two-factor authentication. It authenticates against your RSA server over here. Payment instructions are sent between your back-end systems, so your accountancy system or whatever, and your payment module here. It all goes into a database. This looks quite good as an architectural diagram, but everything we've just talked about pretty much still applies. All of the accountancy tricks that we talked about work, so all the suppression works. The database, how are the payment and the counterparty data stored in the prior to payment generation? They're in the database. Okay, who's got access to the database? Anybody with the credentials. Is the database even encrypted? Probably not. How's the authentication to this, to the back-end ERP system over here secured, where the payment instructions are generated before they get to this payment gateway? Probably not particularly well, so we've still got that. This hasn't really solved any problems, but initially it does look quite good. So, various standard problems, and then we'll talk through how to actually fix this. So, here's an example. This I'm sorry, but again, auditors, it's a particular weakness of mine. So this is a genuine email exchange that I once had with somebody at one of the big 5 when I was saying, so I've come into this company, we've built this systems here, explain to me how this is secured, because they were actually building the system as part of a consultancy gig. So they were explaining the security. So as they can say, it's hard to do this because somebody needs to know the password and they need to have access to the private key. And the password is only known to people in this, the shared password is only known to people in this particular team, and the private key is stored on a controlled shared environment. So, this one is an absolute perler. So we were building a SAP system for a mine, and we needed to sync it with an external HR system. So, okay, fine. Data privacy, blah, blah, blah. How do we secure the data going out between the SAP system to the HR system and back again? So, fine, talk to me. Hashing, crypto, this, that, the other. It's like, yeah, not a problem. I've done this before. I've implemented this for banks. Okay? Why am I telling you this? This moron and people like him on SAP systems have done this kind of stupidity with SAP, the golden whatever, the golden system, making payments to banks and transferring payment details. So in this case, his idea of a hash total was multiply each account number for the respective sum all results, and take the 22 most significant digits. So first of all, again, it's a hash. It's a bad hash. It's an appallingly bad hash, but it's still a hash. It's not a cryptographic signature. So easy to change, easy to predict. Encryption, this one was even better. This one is fantastic. So he explained what he did. He generated a very long key, which was, I don't know, 20 characters or something. From each payment file, you iterate by a given number that's entirely predictable. And then the cipher that he used was something that, literally a 500-year-old cipher that Charles Babbage broke almost 200 years ago, publicly. I think in the Times, he wrote a letter to the Times in response to a challenge. Yeah, so this is the kind of nonsense that's out there. So that's all very amusing. How do we fix it? So you fix it by focusing on this area, because that's what you've got to deal with, okay? If you can sort out that, you've stopped people covering their tracks, and you've stopped the ability to make arbitrary payments. So generally, the way the process works is user A says, I would like to raise a purchase order to make a payment for 100 widgets to company X. User B logs into the system, sees the payment request, purchase order request, he approves it. User C logs into the system, he goes, that looks appropriate, it's within the signing limit, I can see it's been validly approved, I release it, and user D does a finalization process, which is basically the MT101 is automatically created. So you've got, never mind left-hand, right-hand control, you've got 4 people in the process. Well, remember, when a user creates and approves a payment, so all of these 4 people have done their thing, all you're doing is you're writing some rows into a database that can be played with, okay? The MT101 is created and it's stored somewhere in plain text, blah, 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 okay? So, basic idea in trying to secure it. User A creates a payment, fine. The payment's signed with a private key associated with that user. User B checks it. You take that previous payment and private key. You then stamp the whole thing with user B private key. User C goes in and reapproves it or validates it or whatever. Again, so you take the payment request wrapped up in the 2 private keys, and you iterate again. You put another private key around it. Okay. So that way you've got end-to-end continuity. Okay, you get the idea. So actually, that could work. So first thing you think is, well, all we do is, how do we do it? You've got the payment request in the database, and you just have the user ID, and you put their signature there, and then at the end of it, you unwrap it all, and it's all sorted. Okay? So this sounds like a trivial problem to solve. Unfortunately, as soon as you get into the reality, it becomes rather more complex. So this is all, we're dealing with relational databases here, not nice flat tables. So you've got the MT101 information details. So I'm sending an instruction to this bank with, to make a payment to, whoever the person is. This is the recipient. These are transaction details. Blah. The MT101 itself will have who is the servicing institution, stuff, okay? And you'll have multiples of those relate to each recipient, and each recipient will have many transactions associated with them. So you've got many-to-many and many-to-many relationships going on here. So just writing a few rows into a database isn't going to work. Also, it gets worse because the payment approval process will go in various different ways. You won't always have person A, person B, C, and D who approve it. It might be A, B, or C can approve step 1, B, C, D can approve step 2, A, C, and E, step 3, as long as they're mutually exclusive. And it turns into a big mess if you try and do it at the database level. Plus also, who's going to sign it? Well, and this gets into where do you store the keys? Because if all you're doing is your payment app's talking to wherever the key is, you haven't solved the collusion problem. look at that, and we'll talk about why you need this thing in the middle later. But basically, that you need something as a broker in order to provide IT segregation as well as the business segregation. HSM subnet. So what is this HSM thing? So, hardware security module. It's a piece of embedded kit. It's tamper resistant. You fiddle with it. You try and open it up to take the disks out. It zeroes itself. All keys are stored in hardware. You can't export the keys. It does everything. It even will produce you vast quantities of really high quality random numbers. They're really cool. And they're properly secured, okay? They've come basically out of the military, out of government type areas. You authenticate to this. You have a secondary token. This itself is effectively a secondary token that establishes the fact that you can even open an SSH channel to it, and then in order to do any kind of operation on the HSM, so to create keys, whatever, again, you've got to go through the whole authentication and whatever process with this thing again. How do I know that it's used by soldiers and tanks? A Russian guy who works in our office, when we first got these and played around with it, we were going, God, this thing's a bit clunky. He said, yeah. Well, he did in a Russian accent, which I won't try, But yeah, he basically said, yeah, we had these too. They're used in tanks, and you use them to initialize radio communications, so they're properly secured, because each tank is worth a lot of money, and you've got 20 of them in a battle group. That's a lot of destructive power that you really need to be pointed in the right direction, okay? So yeah, when your HSM comes and you've got this thing that you look like you could beat a dragon to death with, it's because it's not designed for use by soft-fingered little people in the office, okay? So, that said, you now have this brokering thing. So, how does it work? Up here, you have your, can you see the mouse? Yep, excellent. You've got your creator, your approver, your finalizer, so you've got your business segregation here, okay? This payment signing request, each time this person does something goes to here. This crypto web service basically brokers. You've got your administrators here. So you've got, on the HSM, you've got your HSM dudes who manage the HSM but don't have access to anything else. The admins who associate the keys that the user has in the HSM with the individual user. And you've got your AD admins who administer the Active Directory, who put this person in the creators group, this person in the finalizers group, and this person in the approvers group, okay? So now you have some nice segregation here as well. So you need to have collusion between this guy, this guy, this guy, in order to do IT trickery, and collusion between those guys, all of them, in order to make a dodgy payment. Because basically they're saying, I will create a fictitious counterparty, you will approve it, and then you will finalize and release it. And they all say, excellent. Except, of course, they won't, because they know they'll be caught. Unless they're really stupid, in which case they'll do it, and then they'll be caught. So, great. But still, what the hell are we signing? Because we just said we can't just we can't add signing keys straight into the database. So what you're actually doing is each time you sign something, you're creating part of the MT101, okay? So what you're doing is you've got some evil piece of XML, of which this is a butchered example. Anybody ever pasted XML into Excel? Into PowerPoint? It's amazing. Microsoft recognizes it as XML and then tries to interpret it, which means that I eventually had to edit it somewhere else and then paste it in as a bitmap because it was just too much hassle to edit it in here. Anyway, so you get the idea. You're actually not playing with the rows in the database. Each time you do your signing and your wrapping for each part of the process, you're sending a blob of XML over. It gets signed. It gets stored somewhere. Okay. generally basically in the database, but stored as XML. So how does it work? Create person 1 goes to sign something, goes to request the payment details. XML comes to here, it gets signed, and then it goes back with the first signature. Then the second person does it, the XML wrapped in the first signature comes over, second signature gets attached, boom, 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 and so on. And finally, the whole thing's done, somebody goes to release it, your XML blob with all 3 signatures goes over, this thing then goes, yep, everything's fine. By the way, you should make sure you include some kind of 2-factor authentication here. So this thing needs to be able to talk to your, in our case, RSA server, so it can verify that the 2-factor authentication details that have been passed along with the XML, so embedded in the XML that gets sent over, are actually legitimate. So this is the person who did create it, they did sign it, the secure ID details match up. So you know it really was them who created it, it really was what they created, all the way down the line. So, hey, it might work. Database administrators can't modify the data. File's protected from the moment the first person puts in the payment request, okay? You can't just add yourself to one group, you've got to add yourself to all sorts of others. Job done? No, because what have we forgotten? If you route the highly secured, and it needs to be highly secured, but if you route the highly secured brokering service here, you can obviously take all of this stuff, submit a different MT101, or intercept it on the way back, and off it goes for payment. So, yeah. You need to think about it a bit more. So what do? You don't create the MT101 and send it over. That XML, okay, well, you do create the MT101, but you don't send an MT101 back. There are various ways of doing it. This is the way we chose. What we chose to do is XML comes here, this strips off all the signatures, verifies the RSA, as well as in the 2-factor authentication, as well as the actual cryptographic signatures, creates the MT101's created, and then it gets sent to the HSM signs it, and then the signature, not the MT101, but the signature is sent back to the payment application. There is now some code on the payment application that dives into the database, grabs back the XML, which is all nicely signed, creates, unwraps it all, creates the MT101. The signature is just signed against a public key. Okay, so again, you can verify the signature, strip it off, and you're left with a hash. If that hash is the same as the resultant hash from the signature that's sent back, you know that the MT101 that you've just generated from your payment application is the same as the one that got signed over here. So what do? As per line, wherever it is, line 6, the application then takes the MT101 it's just generated, which it knows is the same as the one that got sent. It takes the signature it's been sent by the HSM. It takes recipient's public key, calls it all with GBG, and then sends it off. Now, you might be wondering, why have we bothered? Why don't we just generate the MT101, attach the signature, send it off, and if they don't match because somebody's fiddled with it along the way, it doesn't matter because the signature won't match and FIDES or Swift or whoever it is will bounce it. Well, we don't do that simply because we'd like to know about the fact that we have a problem, which is probably actually we screwed up the code rather than somebody's trying to defraud us, before we send it off to FIDES. So we're just doing that not as a security check, but just as an application code check, okay? So there are some extra steps you can make. So you'll notice that we haven't talked about bringing back the resultant statement file, the MT940, and unencrypting that using the HSM infrastructure, and then being absolutely certain that the statement file we get back hasn't had some kind of suppression done to it and is then being before it's uploaded. We walked through a lot of scenarios, and where we ended up was concluding that as long as we are absolutely certain end-to-end about the payment file, it's not really worth doing the same with the statement file on the way back. It may be there are some circumstances you could potentially imagine with all sorts of internal collusion, where somebody is also internal collusion that happens before the whole process starts, or alternatively during the process people know that they're approving a fraudulent request, in which case maybe then suppressing it would be useful. But on the other hand, the people who are doing that probably have access to the accounting system anyway, at least one of them does. So they can suppress it in the system, okay, through the authentication details they have. So I don't think doing the same thing with the statement file buys you a lot. But if you want to argue about it, I'm up for it and we'll do it at the bar later. So, some takeaways. Payment apps are everywhere in all big organizations. They handle huge amounts of money and they're generally secured by morons. So why did I give us the crypto comedy stuff earlier? Because it's funny, but seriously, the people who generally work on those back-end systems do not understand security. They barely understand IT, okay? Financial system vendors, SAP, Microsoft Navision, Dynamics, all of these people, they know their ERPs really well, but they do not seem to understand how the back-end systems should be implemented and what to do about it. Just about every payment application I've ever come across has been vulnerable. I know I have friends who've basically pen-tested every single financial organization in the UK and said that they've seen similar horror stories throughout their career. So why don't we hear about thefts? Well, we've all heard rumors of this or that, okay? But I mean, nothing big, nothing that I've ever been able to substantiate. So my feeling is it's just because this is an area that's just not well enough understood by the people who actually go after this kind of thing seriously. So I don't know, who are we paranoid about today? Is it Russian crime gangs? Whatever, I don't know. But whoever it is we're paranoid about today doesn't understand this area well enough. But they will, okay? So those of you who work for a bank or do consulting, go off and look for this and fix it, okay? It's a bit of an interesting problem to solve. And my other pet bugbear, my apologies for the minor rant, anybody in the security industry who says they can't get budget to do things, I just don't understand. If you can't get budget to do things, it's because you're fixing the wrong problem, okay? This is an absolute business problem. It's about P&L, it's about money, it's about fraud, okay? It's a problem that needs to be fixed, and if you can't sell this, then, well, you're either working for a very strange organization with very strange priorities, or the problem's not with the organization. So, that said, we have 10 minutes left, maybe. My watch is a mechanical Swiss watch, which means it's completely inaccurate. So, with whatever time we've got left, do I have any questions? I'm not aware of any solution off the shelf that does this.
Sounds like an obvious area to just sell a solution that implements the best practice and then it becomes an issue of integrating these into each solution.
I think the problem is all back-end systems generally are legacy to some extent or other. So you can buy standard components like the HSMs, okay? But it's then a case of writing code to glue it all together. You're going to have to put code on your payment gateway and or your ERP, which is often the same thing. You're going to have code there. So maybe you can have some standard libraries, but the other problem, of course, as I said, is depending on which bank you're dealing with and which bureau, the EFT or even the MT101 will not be standard. They'll all be different. So you'll have a whole load of configuration and changes you're going to need to do. So it's not a plug it in and go away solution. You could probably package up something and best practice, yes, but just drop it in and it all works. I don't think so.
It seems at the moment everybody's building it from scratch without even reference to best practice.
I'm not sure if many people are building it from scratch. I don't think many people are. I think most people are just ignoring the problem because they don't know that it's there.
I mean, they're building their solution from scratch, just ignoring all the stuff you spoke about. It seems like
You could undoubtedly create a best practice guide around it. There are best practice guides out around it right now, but they say useless things like, secured shared area should be, secured, that kind of thing.
Go back to your diagram which showed
Which one?
your solution when you go back where you showed where the solution would have to happen.
This one.
Yeah, you've got creators, approvers, and finalizers. Yeah, I take it that's active directory approvers or something.
Yes, yes.
The only issue I'm quite seeing with that is that banks have shed a lot of people at the moment, and they're not able to put people into approve. The actual approval and the finalisation goes down to the row level within the database. For instance, you could be an approver for a transaction where I could be a finaliser, and on another transaction, I could be an approver, you could be a finaliser.
That's fine. You just need to make sure that your payment app or your ERP or whatever it is has some code in it that makes sure that even if exactly the same people are in the creator, approver, and finalizer group, that whoever is going through this process, you've got a minimum of 2 different people for each of for those 3 steps. Which is this is a common thing. Because if you've got a small branch office in, Luanda or something, then you're not going to have many people who work in the accountancy side. So you will have 1 or 2 people. So again, that's why you just need to build in that differentiation logic there, rather than having all of these people in this group and they can never be in the other groups. Because as you say, that won't work.
It's quite right what you say. It has to be thoroughly tested, but at the moment, as banks are sharing opinions, they're finding, people who were previously in different roles, certainly, the CISOs maybe checks breaking, which they've not done.
Yeah, if you don't have your mover process sorted out, then they're going to bring their rights with them. Any other questions? Yes. Well, you've effectively, you need one for your RSA, wherever that's gone. You need one, obviously, for RSA. Sorry, I'm not sure I follow, probably because I didn't hear. So could you say that again?
Timestamp server, which is normally HSM,
Yeah.
sees the data, it's a signature, an extra signature on saying I saw the data at this time. Would that have anything to do with it?
I don't know. Not having thought about it in great detail, I'd say probably not, because as long as the HSM has signed it, you know that it's seen and signed it. At exactly what time, you're probably less worried about. But that's assuming you're signing with an HSM, so you know that the private key is well and truly secured. If you haven't well and truly secured that private key because you're too cheap to buy an HSM, then something like that is probably useful.
In crypto website, there's something like Cloudflare's Red October.
Pardon?
Cloudflare got a project called Red October Key Delegation. Would that be something suitable to use, or its purpose for the crypto web service?
Okay. Sorry, just to repeat the question. Oh, there you go. Here. Sorry.
Cloudflare have a project called Red October, and that's for key delegation. You need 2 or more signees sign off encryption and decryption. Sounds like something you might be able to repurpose for the crypto web service.
Potentially. Remember, the crypto web service is more than just about associating keys with users. It's also about being part of the process of stripping and creating the MT101 in order to then send to the HSM to sign. Because the HSM is, you can't fiddle with the code there in order to get it to do any interpretation or munging of data into XML or whatever into an MT101. So something has to do that. But clearly it can't be a payment gateway, because otherwise, what the hell's the point? Any other questions? Thank you for being an active audience, and I will undoubtedly see some of you around. Thank you.